Hi, I'm Peter Kindfield, and this is my presentation of my PWG PDC design and implementation project. My site is on occupied Korea territory. We're at 6,200 feet. Um, we get about 29 inches of rain a year and mostly, or of precipitation, and mostly that's in the form of snow in the winter. Fire is a huge issue for us up here. And another big issue is that our soil is incredibly depleted because we're always told to remove fuel from our yards. And of course, as we permaculturalists know, fuel is organic matter that returns nutrients into the soil cycle. So we got some issues there. I'm kind of a funny PDC student in that I've been learning and doing permaculture for over 15 years, and I've been teaching it to children for about 10 years. Clearly, finishing my PDC is long overdue. Jennifer Albanese has been my mentor for the course and for much of my permaculture journey before I started this course. I can't imagine a better guide for me. That said, any flaws in this project are my own. You can lead a permaculture student to a sketch pad, but you can't make them an artist. My goals for this project center around the fact that I believe that we're in the midst of ecological and social meltdown, and that our entire species is at risk of extinction. And I think that the best way to respond to this in terms of my personal sanity and also the best thing that I can do for the planet is live a life that kind of models connection and participation with rather than dominance over. And to do that with the land around me and the people around me, and to try to help other people do the same. So my maps, my least proud piece. Um, okay, so here's my base map. It took me 3 years to be willing to try to draw this. Drawing has kind of got beat out of me as a kid in public school, so this was tough for me. But anyway, the shaded areas are in green. Our yard slopes gently towards the street and more steeply in what we think of as our backyard, the east yard. Yeah, we'll learn more about the site as we go on. So in terms of sectors, we have a lot of trees. So we have a fair amount of sun in certain locations, but not a lot. Fire coming from the south is a big concern for us. And we also have sort of a view issue in that cars park on the west side of our house. And, we'd like to see less of them. In terms of water, we have the water from our gray water system, which I'll be talking about a lot. And then also the location of spigots is important for me just because these days I've been watering by hand. Um, uh, my zones are kind of funny because we live on a small site, and I'm all over my yard every day and in the national forest near my yard every day. So my zones 3 through 5 are actually remote zones. They're places where I teach and do other permaculture-like projects that are not right around my house. Obviously, sectors and zones guided our component placement. The big featured components that we have right now are our gray water garden that I'm hopefully going to turn into an uncaged garden over time. On the west side of our house, Orchard Row on the north side of our house, which will hopefully become a food forest, more of a food forest. I have a raised bed there. That's our sunniest area. I plan another raised bed, and our worm bin is in the shade of the garage. And this is a pretty big worm bin. It's 4x4, and we use it to process all of our compost. As I've mentioned, our gray water system is super important. It's super dry up here. The first thing that we did really with our land, which was really just a bunch of stripped bare earth, was build this gray water system. The house, much to our pleasure, was already plumbed so that everything but poop water came out of pipes, but these pipes were redirected out into the forest. And so we cut them off, put in a Y, so if we ever need to, we can still redirect the water out. But for now, every bit of water we use in our house comes out here, and we are super, super aware of that. It really changes your relationship with your inside water when you know that you're going to be eating it on down the road. So here's my gray water system closer to now. As you can see, we've got a berry bramble going here. I've got all kinds of wildflowers growing along the berm itself, and the berry bramble is kind of above the water bubble created by the on-contour swale. Our edges and microclimates. So the first interesting thing is, we are at an edge. We are an edge. Our house is the first house in from the forest. That also means we have a fire danger coming in that direction, but also all kinds of wild animals entering our property or entering the property we share with them from the south and from the east. And we also have an edge with the street, which is an edge we like to sort of mediate, work on getting hedgerow in here so that we don't see the cars as much as we do. And in terms of microclimates, we're really creating our own microclimate in this gray water area because it's such a dry place that even when you go out our front door, you can kind of feel it cooler around the gray water. It's kind of amazing. In terms of paths, patterns, and flows, same kind of issue. Our house faces west. To the south, we have the national forest. We have the street. We want to be able to, a lot of what we do is with kids. We want the kids to be able to get safely into our yard. We want the kids to be able to get safely into the national forest. So this is the view coming out my front steps. I kind of love this choice here of heading out into the forest by the blackberry berm or taking a right turn and heading to our raised beds and or what we are calling Orchard Row for now. Looking at it from the other angle, I love this flow coming up from the forest. We have this lovely choice to go to the left past the berry bramble towards the garden and food forest to the left, or going to the right to where we do our opening circle and the like. You can see our chipper, social permaculture. I made a lot of friends as soon as I got up here, and one of them's got a chipper. I teach their student, I teach their child, they let me borrow their chipper when I need it. It's kind of great. The front yard is west facing and gets pretty good light. The house is south facing, and so we built an attached garden that you can see over on the far upper right corner. Yeah, this is the place that I'm mostly experimenting with. What can I have free from animals without them eating it? Mostly so far that's mint, and I've got some penstemons going, some white sage, and a bunch of other plants up here you'll see in the plant notes. Here is my raised bed. This is the sunniest part of our house. Notice the lovely propane tank in the middle. I've already dug a trench to move that tank out of the garden area. And then this will be raised beds for now. I've got a 5 cultivar apple tree and a pomegranate tree that I planted. Here you see an aspect of my dirt building system, the soil sifter and half wine bottle, half wine, whatever they're called, not a casket. Um, not doing well with words. Anyway, you can see what it is. And that's where I keep my soil that's in the process of being built. Proudest thing in my garden is I've got a nice asparagus, perennial asparagus plot going. I'm very pleased with that. Built environment, we've done very little other than added the attached greenhouse. And we don't plan on really doing a lot of building. We've got the attached greenhouse on the south side of the house. And I guess you could consider the gray water and worm bin kind of as part of our built environment. I'm sorry. So in terms of relationships between the components, I have a long list of components and I talk about them later on, but I just wanted to show a picture of the relationship of sort of our soil building system and how it is very cyclical, and I play a major role in the connection between components, and I'm okay with that. Me moving stuff around a lot is kind of part of my lifestyle exercise, so that's all good. One of the things that I think is sort of really neat is how the components, our on-site components, are connected with all of our local learners, kids, families, and adults, and then how that is all connected to our globally available packaged curriculum. Oops, should say packaged, not packed. So, the kids interact with all the on-site components, and it's really interesting to me how interested in working on the site the kids are. They're called to work with the tools. They love digging in the soil. They love harvesting. And through their activity, I figure out what kinds of things I want to make units on. So all of these things are interconnected that way. I was looking for a better interactive picture with the kids, but this is one that I had. They're just an interesting bunch, and they're called by nature to do all kinds of things. This was actually part of my Tai Chi class. We walked past this rock that we often do postures on, and the kids said, "Hey, can we meditate on this rock?" That's kind of what I mean by there are calls to interactions all over the place. So implementation phases. We got here in the fall of 2019, and our real first thing, we were sort of snowed in when we first got here, and mostly what we worked on was really the preparing to do our business. We didn't have our site yet, and we did put a lot of effort into making a lot of social connections and really building community. In fact, when we landed here, the day that we moved in, we had an article about us in the local paper, and started up a growers group, and the social stuff actually kind of a little bit preceded the physical permaculture. Our phase one was, or I'm sorry, our phase two was inviting life. And the big piece of inviting life here, as I've already mentioned, was getting our gray water system going, but we also planted a bunch of wildflowers. As you can see, all this bare earth is a nightmare, and so we started right away to work to get rid of it, get rid of the bare soil. So next was sort of growing some food. And so I started a raised bed. My first raised bed was, I just can't get myself to buy soil. So we did kind of a bootleg lasagna. I put down a bunch of cardboard. I put down compost that was as finished as I could get it, although lots of it was raw. I put down a layer of soil, and native soil, which is very depleted of nutrients, as I mentioned, covered it with wood chips, and was actually able to do some growing that first season. Next year, can I have some more? We wanted to do more growing of food, and so we got the attached greenhouse built. I joined the Nature Center board and actually became vice president. I started teaching courses at the Idlewild Community Garden. And then in 2 remote groups, Earth Guardians, a kid-centered group, and the Deep Adaptation Forum, where we talk a lot about how to deal with ongoing social and ecological collapse, and got going on those social components. In the future, we'd really, we do all this cage gardening, as I mentioned, and I hate it. It separates things and isolates things and just goes against my whole approach to, everything being related, and leaving room for lots of dynamic interactions between components. Even though I do have that going on within our cages, I want to get rid of the cages and move to more of a food forest approach. I'm starting to work on getting some guilds going with the trees that I've already planted, and like that. Final phase is really, and probably happening concurrently, is making the food forest more of a community food forest. Just kind of having more work days, and food sharing events that we host here, and harvesting days especially for people who join our work days, but I would also want it to be more open than that. And I really want to finish my book, which I'd love to share with any of you if you're interested. In terms of maintenance and resiliency, sort of all of our maintenance issues are actually kind of part of the social implementation, right? Bringing in other people to help us with maintenance is kind of part of our social permaculture, and also gives us some resiliency. And we're doing everything we can to be kind to all the people who we work with, and they so far have responded by being really kind with us. And that certainly also adds to our resiliency. And then the other big deal is that I'm hoping that our maintenance issues are actually going to go down as local predators discover what a fine feeding spot we've become for local primary consumers. I'm just going to buzz through a lot of this, but some of it is the social components, so I'm going to want to say more. We have a ton of resources here, everything from being attached to the forest to a bunch of social resources that you can read about on this page. In terms of social and invisible structures, we have 2 big deals at the start. One is I'm super aware we're living on occupied Cahuilla land. I'm also super aware, as a very privileged old white dude, that I've benefited from my privilege in a million ways. One of them is I was raised by a Belizean woman, and I feel called to return to be of service to folks in Belize, and have started working on that. And then in terms of our financial structures, nothing really fancy other than trying to do as much bartering as we can, and also trying to do as much gifting as we can. So these are websites that are connected with my social permaculture efforts, our local growers collective, our business, and then these are all pieces of volunteer work that I'm doing, that I see very much interconnected with our site, where I'm really learning the stuff that I'm going out then and teaching, and like that. Technology, transportation, and energy, we have kind of a small site, low tech. We would like to look at solar and wind, haven't yet. In terms of transportation, the best thing is I have the best commute in the world. You've seen it in my path and flow slides. I walk out my door, and there I am at work. Couldn't be better. In terms of animal waste and nutrient cycles, our big deal is we don't have space, and we're not really interested. We're vegans. We don't eat, like occasionally eat eggs if I help my friends with their chickens, but I don't really want to have animals on our site. And so what that means is, of course, we've got to figure out how to bring in domestic animals on the site. And so we have to figure out how to bring in wildlife, and also how to bring in um, other forms of manure, because we don't have, cows pooping on our land. So I collect up manure from elsewhere and use it in our soil building process. List of components, other components, edible plant species that we first start, some of the wildflower species that we've planted. I've planted a lot more. Some of these are collected. Some of these I purchased from the Theodore Payne Foundation, a local native wildflower place. These are my old observation and assessment notes, noting that what I've already mentioned, our land is very dry to begin with and very depleted of organic material. My personal boundary assessment, we have always been givers. I've probably given too much in my past. I've learned how to set limits, but particularly I've kind of merged really found out my joy of, I used to be school principal. My favorite part of that was I got to teach the way I wanted to and being with the kids. My favorite part of working with the kids was working with the kids outside. And now my giving is all of a form that brings me great joy, which is supporting children learning about interdependence out in the forest and on our site, of course, and then also helping children learn out in nature. And so I really get to do what my joy, what my bliss is. I'd love for y'all to read this. I'm not going to bother reading it here, but I no longer use the term hold system design, and this side explains why. And my evaluations, and again, I can't say more about how great the course was for me, and how great Jen was as a mentor. Heather always responded to my questions really quickly. And then my personal evaluation, I learned an enormous amount in this project. I'm very proud of what I have accomplished. I guess I wish the presentation would have been a little more polished, particularly my artwork, but I'm working with me as I am as a 40-year-old. And thank you all. Peace.